Okay.
Okay, perfect.
So without further ado, welcome to the session. We will first give a brief outline of the CAP and the relationship with peatlands and the CAP. The CAP stands for Common Agricultural Policy, which is the EU big agricultural policy. And then we're going to talk a little bit about youth advocacy and creative ways of changing things in the world. And we're going to finish hopefully around 8:15, but 8 CS CEST.
Yeah.
But maybe a little bit after. Now we're a bit late.
Yeah, now we have to be on super speed, I suppose.
Yeah. So first I'm going to play, so this was the soundscape. I'm going to play a little video that introduces RE-PEAT, just to give a bit more background. How do you go back? Okay, it's fine. Okay. We're a youth-led...
What's RE-PEAT?
Okay.
So, what's RE-PEAT?
Well, we're a youth-led collective co-creating a peatland paradigm shift.
And what does that mean? And anyway, what is peat?
Okay, let's start at the beginning with the Peat 101. Peatlands, also known as bogs, mires, moors and fens, are composed of a mass of partially decomposed plant matter, peat. The plant matter is suspended in its path towards decomposition by a lack of oxygen and the acidity of the stagnant surrounding water.
Oh, so you mean the plants kind of get pickled in the water?
Well, something like that. Then the not quite decomposed plant material accumulates gradually over thousands of years and creates a peatland.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think I've been to one before when I was little. Are they quite common?
Well, they're not too common. They only take up 3% of the world's land surface. But did you know that despite this, peatlands are the largest terrestrial carbon store on Earth? They store twice the amount of carbon as all the forests.
Wow, but what exactly is a peatland paradigm shift?
Well, put simply, a peatland paradigm shift is the shift in perception that happens when you go from not valuing peatlands to valuing them. Because when you appreciate peatlands, you also learn how to appreciate the memories of deep time, space, Earth systems, and each other.
Oh yeah, haven't lots of bog bodies been found in peat and they were really well preserved?
Yeah, that's right. So part of the peatland paradigm shift is valuing the many gifts that healthy peatlands bring to the world. These include a stable climate system, reduced flooding, reduced fires, decreased saltwater intrusion, the prevention of drainage-related subsidence, and increased biodiversity. You can even find lots of weird and wonderful flora and fauna, like the insect-eating sundew. Understanding the gravity of what the world would look like without them is also part of the peatland paradigm shift.
Wow, peatlands seem to be really important for the planet. I had no idea. So tell me a little bit more about RE-PEAT then. How are you going to make this peatland paradigm shift happen?
Well, one thing that we do is talk to people like you who don't really know that much about peatlands and make them aware of the threats that peatlands face today, as well as their importance. We like to use creative modes of communicating because peatlands get our imagination spinning. Another thing we do is connect different types of people who would not normally get together. Let's say an archaeologist and a policymaker, or a poet and a biologist, or all four.
But who exactly is RE-PEAT then?
Well, we're a collective of about 20 people, mostly under 25s, as well as some youthful over 25s, who work in 6 different working groups. As a collective, we strive to be non-hierarchical and respect different people's ebbs and flows of their precious time and energy resources. As a group, one of our main philosophies is the belief in the process, not just the outcome, which is exciting because that means we're always learning along the way. Okay.
That was super. That's the first time I've seen
That
it.
was pretty homemade video.
I really appreciate
you
it.
made this video then.
Amazing.
So also I just wanted to say that this video will also be played at the Green Culture Festival, which will happen this weekend. So if anyone's interested in also joining that festival, it's really cool festival.
What is it?
And we're going to send the link in the chat box so you can check it out there. So on to the CAP and peatlands.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I was actually playing the person in that video who didn't know anything about RE-PEAT or peatlands. So don't let the similarity in the voice throw you off. I do actually know a fair bit, maybe not as much as everybody in the chat now. But for those who don't know, we just wanted to talk a little bit about peatlands and their role in the CAP, or I suppose lack of role. So essentially the CAP, which is the Common Agricultural Policy, is the EU-wide policy that it basically entails where a lot of the budget goes from the EU in general, and then decides what initiatives to support and what programs to support. And there are two pillars, and the first one deals with direct payments, so directly supplementing farmers' incomes. And the second one deals more with programs such as community building, environmental restoration, rural development, and these kind of indirect initiatives. And how it currently stands is that peatlands and the plants that grow on peatlands, which is known as paludiculture, literally wet agriculture, these are not currently counted as agricultural crops under the CAP, and therefore they're completely exempt from these subsidies. So any farmer who is wanting to pursue paludiculture has to forego this subsidy, essentially, which we see as a really large issue because it prevents people who want to engage in this from doing so, and also then leads to, well, basically stops us from developing these ideas further and gaining more knowledge through practical application of paludiculture. So that's one way in which we think the CAP should better deal with peatlands within the EU. And the other way is also that, and something that RE-PEAT deals a lot with, is thinking about how we can value ecosystems and landscapes outside of their only financial value. As you saw a little bit in the video as well, that we want also for peatlands to be valued for these many other capacities and gifts they give us, essentially. So in that way, farmers and people who are really caretaking for the land, they would be rewarded financially for this preservation of ecosystem services, I suppose. So these are a few ways that we think that peatlands and paludiculture can be better dealt with in the CAP. And there was a position paper who was written by Greifswald Meyer Centre, the National University of Ireland, and Wetlands International, that lays out some very specific demands. And I think somebody will add it to the chat in a second. And this is something that we agree with. And then when we were thinking, how do we now approach this situation, we decided to go about it in a very narrative storytelling way, as although we have peatland scientists in the team, such as Tanya, we aren't the experts. So we wanted to bring in a lot of different voices, which is something we also think that the Common Agricultural Policy should be more aware of, is the diversity in the EU and taking all of these varied perspectives into account. And I think that's my little blurb, and I believe I have some questions coming, so hopefully I'm prepared and knowledgeable enough about those.
If you'll excuse me, I must leave now.
Oh,
Okay.
Sure, absolutely. We are recording it anyway, so perhaps you can catch it a bit later.
Amazing. Thank you.
Good to have you here. Bye. Okay, Beth, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
You talked about paludiculture.
Yes.
Could you maybe talk a little bit more about what that is for people who don't know about paludiculture?
Yeah, so essentially it's wet agriculture, even in the name that's what it is. In Latin, palus is wet. But deeper than that, deeper, also a little peat pun, is the notion that paludiculture is where peat can be allowed to continue to form whilst you're also using the land for resources and for the crops that are growing there. So you're not taking enough that the peat formation has stopped, which means leaving the soil waterlogged enough and leaving enough plant matter to partially decompose and continue to build up these layers. So really trying to find this balance between using the land effectively for our own consumption, because we obviously need that, but also in a way that allows for future generations and for non-human life to also use the land.
Tanya, we got a question?
Yeah. So why is it better to have like wetter agriculture?
Well, I guess there are a few reasons. And one of the first things, I mean, is of course the environmental impact. So if peat is storing so much carbon, then of course when we drain that, it is then also being emitted. So it's a two-way street there. So when the peat is remained wet, then the carbon stays within it, and we're not having additional carbon dioxide enter the atmosphere. There are a lot of other ecosystem services that are offered, as Frankie mentioned also in the video, such as the flood prevention mechanisms that are involved, biodiversity, and quite a unique set of biodiversity actually. So all of these services, but it's also quite interesting for us from more of a heritage point of view as well, in the sense that it would really be quite a dramatic difference, I think, in how the landscape is used. And this is something that was pointed out to us at the very start when we learned about peatlands, was this is how the land was used, especially in this part of Europe, for a very long time. And the landscape looked very different. And so to now go back to, well, I guess go forward again to going back to how that land was, then it also requires us to relearn what our ancestors knew and to gain a newer understanding, a deeper understanding with the landscape and the land, and renew this relationship, which we think in a lot of ways we've become severed from, especially those of us maybe living in the city a lot more than those in the country and living on farms. But it's quite an interesting relationship, I think, to kind of rediscover. So that's one of the reasons. I mean, I'm not necessarily speaking on behalf of everyone in RE-PEAT is super interested in this, but I think it's a very interesting notion personally.
I really agree, because like I think we feel really attached to these tractors and like the modern windmill and lots of different machinery and tools, but really these have come about in like the last 50 years. And so compared to, you know, yeah, like you say, like the timeline over the last 2000 years, like this is such a small window. But for some reason, like we all, I think, yeah, myself included, like we feel like a really, strong attachment to how things are now. And like, yeah, well, but like what are some of the horticultures that we would grow in like polyculture?
Yes, that's also quite interesting in the sense that it would be, again, quite different from what we see in our landscapes and in our supermarkets and stuff today, which is of course true for so many things that they were coming from the Americas or from India when people were colonizing there. So they brought a lot of these plants back. So they're really like native European plants are very different. And this feeds into that idea of it being quite dramatically different landscape. But there's way more than you would imagine actually that can grow on peatlands and wetlands. There's a really nice video made by Andy Clark that talks about rice being grown on peatlands, or on wetlands rather. But you can also grow plants such as cranberries, or taro also grows on wetland. So these kind of plants, but also a lot of the options are outside of kind of culinary things. So then you would have plants that you could use to make thatching out of, for example. Animal fodder is a really large one, and even some more surprising ones like cattail that you can eat and stuff like this. And we're actually making a cookbook where we show some of these ingredients as examples, and there are things like making cookies out of cattail pollen, which is something that's really surprising and really interesting to explore these kind of new ideas, I suppose. But yet not all of it is edible, I suppose, or designed for eating. It's also for other uses.
Nice. I think maybe one last question. What about farmers that wouldn't want to switch to wet agriculture?
So that is also something that we've thought a lot about, especially as kind of people who are not engaged in farming, or at least as our main professions, that we can't go around telling people how they should and shouldn't farm, of course. So what's really important for us is that the economic provisions are there so that farmers who do want to take it up can do. And that if we start with the economic provisions now, that this just transition where we change how we do agriculture is done in a way that is just and is equitable. Because ultimately we are in a climate and ecological crisis, and there are a lot of changes that need to be made across the board in so many different sectors. And agriculture is one of those. And in the EU, it's also a very large one, taking up a large amount of the budget as well as land use area. So it's a very important sector. And if we switch, the earlier we switch, the better, and we can ensure a more just transition, which means farmers who are more hesitant or farmers who don't want to do it in a certain way are not forced to, but the economic provisions are there. And if we leave it too long, I think that there are many ways in which the just transition wouldn't be that. So it's really just to provide the option and to start the movement building towards non-drainage based agriculture.
Nice. Oh, one last question, which I forgot. The timeline of the CAP maybe is
maybe good to say. So yeah, leading into this idea also of having a just transition is the fact that this CAP policy was originally intended for 2021 till 2027, now has an additional 2-year transitionary period, which means essentially we're locking in the next decade within this policy. So it's very important that it does look ahead and it does take in these climate and ecological crisis and what that means and what we can already be doing to mitigate and adapt to that. Because yeah, it lasts a decade, and then beyond that it can have implications further, whether positive or negative. And so for us, it's very important that within this CAP already very progressive and forward-thinking ideas are implemented, so we can hopefully adjust better to changes that are going to happen across the board because of climate and ecological crises.
Tanya, do you have anything to add?
No, I guess we can just I'll just read out the question in the chat.
Yeah, sure.
So Kieran asked, is there anyone in Europe practicing polluticulture? And then there's been a YouTube video posted, which is really fantastic, about a farmer that's using Typha to make building insulation. So that's a really great polluticulture example. And I guess I know, and I've seen like several test cases, and as far as I know, I think there are like a handful or maybe even more now of farms that are kind of expanding to really make it just an ongoing business as their own industry. So yeah, I'd say that I know of a handful, and maybe there's probably more that I don't know about. And then there's a lot of test cases as well.
Yeah.
Of like small scale farms that aren't necessarily profitable or so. So yeah. And yeah, everyone else, like, please post a question in the chat if you have one. Would be really happy to answer and discuss it. And then I guess, like, well, part of today was to talk about the PEAT anthology, which has been a huge part of RE-PEAT's response to the CAP. And so the PEAT anthology is a compilation of different media from a wide variety of people. I think over 30 people contributed, maybe 50.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I looked through the documents just yesterday, like for the full one, the full compiled document, and I was really like flabbergasted by just how many pages and pages and pages there were of really, really, really special, wonderful contributions. And so today, so this, but this anthology, so it's, some are poems, some are drawings, some are very scientific, kind of short articles, almost like a blog post. Some are more personal letters. And there's even been, I think, some videos that have been contributed, and some music. And yeah, so that's really lovely. And the point of all of this is to then hand this over to the MEPs at the beginning of their discussions on the CAP, which, so that's happening like in a month or so. Is that right, Bethany? Yeah.
A little less.
A little bit less, yeah. So really soon. So that's why we're putting it together now. And yeah, we wanted to read a few of these contributions out to you. And I think several of you that are with us today in this room have contributed. So thank you so much for making this possible. So do we need to say anything else to kind of explain the anthology? Did I say it clearly?
I want to also add that, like, we just spoke about this position paper earlier, and we kind of wanted to do something that was slightly like complementary to this position paper, because yeah, you can get, like, I think a lot of people have this experience where someone can tell you a fact, but like maybe unless you're like actually kind of emotionally kind of attached or have some kind of connection to something, like the facts don't necessarily land. So it's kind of this idea of like bringing in like the evidence and the facts and the kind of like very yeah, like dry information, and then kind of complementing that with really emotional and beautiful and emotive things to make you kind of go, whoa, like, you know. Anyway, so I'm going to read Kate Foster's submission, which was really nice. So, dear agricultural policymaker, I can imagine you're reading a lot of technical reports on peatlands just now, and you're needing to work out policy options for the climate crisis. But all the same, I hope that you managed to catch up on the 24-hour global peat fest that RE-PEAT coordinated. Then you'll see a whole range of ways that peatlands matter. To get introduced, I'm an artist and I'm committed to peatland restoration. In Scotland, I wanted to help my peatlands in the picture. I wanted to help put peatlands in the picture. Here is one of the best preserved peat bogs in southwest Scotland, Silver Flow. Have you ever heard of the squelch that peatlands make when you're literally walking on water, or felt how they move underfoot? You'll know from the RE-PEAT anthology that bog mosses create ecosystems that hold water and drip with histories of environment and human culture. Here is a drawing of a sphagnum moss. Should I read the whole thing? Yeah.
I think maybe that one, it's really nice because there are a lot of images in there as well. So maybe it's nicer to read the rest of the text with the image. The sphagnum moss that she drew is on the screen there that was mentioned. And there's a really great picture of a water table at the end. So when we release the anthology, you have to look out for that one as well.
Yeah. Nice.
I loved the word
I'm just going to give a little heads up to Jan Peters, which is a perfect name. So Jan was actually the initial sower of the seed of RE-PEAT, and he works at the Greifeld Meyer Center, and this is his submission that he posted. Tanya, would you like to read?
Well, yeah, I actually saw, I'm pretty sure, Jan Peters' name in here. So I'm inviting you to read your own submission if you would like to, but that's also really putting you on the spot. So I'm very, very happy to read it out. But just like, whilst I take a second to open it, feel free to pipe up and volunteer. And I'm just looking for it.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm here, but you can read it out because I don't have it on my screen. I just follow you, and I really enjoyed this webinar. It's really great, and it would be an honor if you can read out my contribution.
Okay, well, great to hear from you, and apologies for putting you on the spot. And I'm more than happy to read it out.
No
and thanks again.
No problem at all.
Okay. The future of peatlands is wet. I grew up in a northwestern German city surrounded by peatlands, but all of them drained, mostly used as grassland for cattle farming. Although many places in the countryside had the word moor, German for peatland, in their names. These were meadows with cows and deep ditches in my childhood memories. Nothing linked them in my imaginations to the very few and small semi-natural mires remained in protected areas of the region. There, you could still find mosses, heather, and nice boardwalks. I had no idea what peatlands are, that drainage actually leads to degradation, how they function, and why are they so important for us. And I have the feeling I was not the only one. Then I moved to Greifswald for my studies of landscape ecology, and they opened up my eyes on peatlands. I have learned why they are special, how they marvelously linked between water, soil, and vegetation, what their role in climate regulation is, and how beautiful they are. Only after this, I realized what it means that we destroyed 98% of these unique and beautiful ecosystems in Germany and other Western European countries. During excursions and field trips, I got to know the fantastic natural mires still existing in the Baltic countries, Russia, and elsewhere on our planet, even in Cuba and Nicaragua. In the latter countries, they are as unknown to people as they have been to me for the longest. In Central Europe, we don't even know anymore how beautiful mires look like, and I started to wonder how we could better protect and restore them. The facts speak for themselves. Peatlands store vast amounts of carbon, are important for water and nutrient retention and buffering, and give habitats for endangered biodiversity. However, we also need to develop a vision how cultural peatland landscapes could look like in the future when they wouldn't be drained anymore like in the past hundreds, thousands of years, but would be wet again. People need to find their homes in or around wet peatlands and make a living room, at least, some of the areas. The paradigm shift from dry to wet cultivation needs to be seen as a societal task guided by integrative strategies and policies, but also accompanied by education and awareness raising so that people know about what they protect. Therefore, the new CAP and the national strategic plans need to set out ambitious transformative pathways for peatland management, which stops subsidizing destructive drainage and starts to incentivize sustainable practices like polluticulture. Of course, we cannot change land use from one day to another, but we need to have an idea how we achieve our obligations towards humankind and nature, step by step, and take the people along with us. Let's pave the way for a better, wetter peatland future together.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tanya. That was nice to listen to you, to my own text. Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I felt a bit like I just don't know if an Australian accent can really carry a story about the countryside of Germany.
Maybe my German accent would better do it, but it was perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. You wrote it really well.
Thanks.
Okay.
So what's next? Yeah.
This is a bit of a random part, but we thought it would be nice to also have a 2-minute break, or no, not even 2 minutes, 30-second break, and listen to this soundscape by Matthew Alden, which is another one of the Below the Blanket artworks that was for an exhibition in Scotland. And this is actually a recording of a drained peatland. And at the end, if you stay all the way to the end, you'll get to hear a healthy peatland, and you'll get to hear the difference of the two, which is actually very interesting. So I'm gonna play this.
And then we're going to read another contribution right after that. Yeah. So stick around.
Okay, that was just a little snippet of drained peatland for you there. Very eerie. I'm going to go back onto the when Zoom allows me. Okay. And read the next contribution, which is a farmers collective in the Netherlands. Oh yeah, I can read it off the screen. Weiland is a collection of farmers that have come together who
and they advocate on the behalf of farmers in policy and stuff like this. So one of the things they really deal with is peatlands as well, because of course we have a lot of that in the Netherlands.
Yeah, and also we're going to post a link to the Weiland Festival, so you can also check that out.
Yeah, happening on the 19th.
Yeah. So the mission of the time was successful. We're not hungry anymore. We load our shopping carts for little money, but secretly we pay a different price. We no longer feel a connection with the landscape that surrounds us. We peered across the country. A half-heavy Van Nelle dangled from the bird connoisseur's lower lip. We saw lapwings. We saw a hare of high, stiff legs, challenging a buzzard that had probably landed close to one of its young. We discovered everything, and I was thrilled. I didn't watch Planet Earth on television. I watched the countryside with someone who sighed, Machtish Moa, hopefully I pronounced that, all the time. We were first rank in a Dutch agricultural cultural landscape that vibrated with life. So this was written by Jantine de Boer in the book Landschap Pain, translated by Weiland.
So meaning like landscape pain, I suppose, for the lack of a better translation, but
yeah. So nice.
Wow, good. Yeah, that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And good word.
So the last submission that we're going to read today, and you've got like 46 more to read. There
are
some of them are images, yeah. Is the A&E Collective, so take it away, Tanya.
Yep. Dear policymakers, we as artists have devoted the last 4 years to researching, promoting, and exploring creative ways through which we can come closer to the more than human, with a focus on recognizing and venerating biodiversity in ancient ecosystems, including peatlands. Much of our projects are informed by scientific facts, but we are no scientists or peat experts. We often base our projects on our deep-rooted relationship to the environment, and it is from this instinctive, personal point of view that we are reaching out to you as policymakers. It is of common knowledge that peatlands are the largest natural terrestrial carbon store, but why are they often unnoticed and so poorly valued? We also believe as a collective that peatlands play a key role in shielding our memories. To look at peatlands is to take a glimpse into the past and to the future. Many of our projects incorporate these memories, and as a result, we are expressing real concern for the loss of our precious peatlands in storing these unique stories and narratives. We are on the edge of ecological collapse, and we simply ask you to use your power to protect not only our collective memory, but also this unique habitat, which quietly does so much to protect and compensate for our actions. It's very simple. By increasing the subsidies towards protecting these ancient ecosystems, we can really begin to tackle this ecological crisis. I'm just going to read that sentence again. It's very simple. By increasing the subsidies towards protecting these ancient ecosystems, we can really begin to tackle this ecological crisis. There's only so much we as individuals can do. But as policymakers, you are capable of actioning so much more. We hope you listen to our appeals to help preserve the peatlands, for us, the planet, and our future. So that's from the A&E Art Collective in Scotland. And yeah, very well written.
Yeah. Little did they know the peatlands actually are not so quiet, I suppose.
Yeah.
We'll listen to it again later.
So the final part of the session, I think we're like more or less on schedule, even though we started late. We just wanted to start a conversation more than anything about different forms of advocacy, what the role of youth is and what the role of creativity is. So maybe this is also something that we're gonna like maybe expand out a little bit more to the RE-PEAT group at large. But maybe if there's other people in the Zoom call that also want to chime in, then why not? So I'm going to start off with how do you seed more creativity in activism? And if anyone has a...
So I think Elaine and Jamie have a little answer to this, perhaps.
Yeah, me and Irene have been thinking about this, and I think Irene is on the call as well.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Hi, Irene. Yeah, and we were kind of like chatting about this, and almost like it was funny, like our conversation with it was kind of like almost like the answer to this question, like how do you see more creativity? And I think like the number one thing is kind of collaborating, you know, the value of brainstorming, you know, like, and we were saying like you always come out of RE-PEAT meetings buzzing, you know, they're just so fun because everyone just sort of bounces off each other, and you know, and that's creativity in the sense of like kind of being creative in the you know, in the things that you're doing as an organization. There's like you have the arts and things, and that's kind of what people think of when they think creative, but like actually letting creativity be the sort of like lifeblood of the group, and just sort of like pinging off each other, and then no one knows who came up with the idea in the end, you know, but it was everyone, and so yeah, I think like
with the 24-hour Peat Fest.
Yeah.
I think that was it now. But we ran with it.
Sorry, Jamie.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's awesome. But yeah, I think that's a bit like a really nice thing. But yeah, Irene, you wanna?
Yeah. So when we talk about creativity, I think it often implies this sort of like traditional art form, like writing and painting and drawing, and all of that. But I think with RE-PEAT, we've really managed to take it one step further and have it really be the guiding sort of theme in our work. And I think that this just creates so much more accessibility, excitement, empowerment, confidence, and it really makes magic happen with us. Like I find often that with activism, it's easy to get stuck in known tactics, known strategies, proven theories, etc. And when we really challenge ourselves to go beyond that and imagine anything that is possible, and sort of take that as a starting point, I find that we can really make some very, very valuable changes to our own imagination, like our own sort of framework of thinking, but also we managed to break open a debate that can get stuck in a bit of a loop, and provide some pretty cool and radical alternatives to current solutions that we have in mind. And it's so nice to be a part of that as well, and it allows everyone to feel like they're part of it too, because there are no mistakes. You know, everyone brings their own imagination and their own creativity to the table, and the combination of all that is the product of this group, and it's perfect like that. So that's just something that like Jamie and I were talking about earlier, and I think it really is what makes us as a group, as RE-PEAT, so fun and lovely to be a part of, but also so powerful.
Maybe you can expand a bit more on that power.
The power. Well, yeah. I mean, I think.
How do you think that? Yeah. How does it kind of like come out into the world? Like, what's its power?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're a youth group, and I think that there's a lot of power in youth because we are still quite connected with that the sort of the imaginary children's side of our lives, and we are still, or at least like I hope that we are still capable of sort of distancing ourselves from the current system and imagining other possibilities and bringing something fresh to the table. And I find that often when actions or approaches of advocacy groups are something new, they're just received with so much more openness and enthusiasm. And at the same time, I think that we can be in a very nice way complementary to maybe some people who have been in the field for a longer time, who have a lot of experience, but maybe they have spent so much time in the current system that they have become a bit more disconnected from reimagining different possibilities. And if we can combine our forces, I think that there's a lot of power that we have. Maybe Jamie, you want to also say something about the power of youth advocacy?
Yeah, I think it's that idea of how creativity sort of kind of seeds and kind of relates to the imagination, I think, and we have this. We always come back to it and repeat kind of a reimagined kind of a process of reimagining, and I think that so relates to yeah, being a young person. You know, you just for the fact of having not lived through the world as it is quite so long as others, like the power of that is that it is easier to imagine a world that is different to how it currently is, and I think that is a really valuable thing that youth can bring, and if you're doing it in this kind of creative way, then that makes it all the more better, because it's this kind of dialogue, I guess, between, you know, the young, if you have, and these are generalizations of course, but you know, you have the young people with this kind of imagining and this hope for a different way of doing things, talking to people who are experts and have lived through and know and have that life experience, and that and kind of together, if they both come to talk to each other in this kind of co-creative, kind of collaborative way, I think that's where really exciting things can happen. And yeah, so I think it's that kind of imaginative power of the future, at the same time as the imaginative power of like of other people's experiences, and kind of this sort of which fuels even more collaboration. Collaboration fuels creativity, but creativity and the imagination also fuels better collaboration, because you can through the arts is how you can understand how someone else sees the world, or how, you know, peatlands experience the world. You know, these kind of really interesting ideas, and I think just are so important for building a kind of a truly kind of collective activist sort of movement, and creativity is really at the heart of it.
Yeah, and I think another cool thing about being part of a youth group is that in my experience, young people aren't afraid to say it like it is, and we can be a lot more, we can also afford to be a lot more bold in the things that we wish to see and that we fight for. which allows us to have a more radically rooted and intersectional approach when talking about all the things that are wrong in the world. And RE-PEAT focuses on peatlands, but peatlands are also just this microcosm, this accumulation of a lot of different issues that are happening at the scale of peatlands, but can be expanded to so many other skills as well. And when we can really bring these thoughts, these ideas into the world without any sort of censorship that maybe people who work for a certain company or institution have to deal with because of funding issues or whatever. And we can really say this is our idea and we stand by this and we're gonna fight for it. And we see that there's just all these different forms of injustices coming together, and that they are all interconnected, and that they require a holistic and interconnected approach if we really want to take this seriously and come up with an alternative paradigm.
I actually, while I was listening to you both, I also was thinking as well how much sometimes you just can hit the nail right on the head, both with what you're saying, but my point also is this drawing by Sander. And if you look at it here, this boy is about 3 years old, and he created this artwork in one of our first events, just a very small event in Amsterdam. And you can just see in this art, like the sea levels are rising, the wetlands are stopping the water. It's just, it's so beautiful, and it really hits the nail on the head. And I feel like we always come back to this picture where we feel the need to talk about sometimes youth and children can see so clearly, and also portrayed in such an imaginative way, bringing in all of these ideas that you're saying about maybe a fresh view on the world and things like this, and just going for it. And this image is really, it's also incredibly accurate, I believe. So
yeah, he just sat there and he just did his thing, and he just produced this like marvelous artwork, and we were like, okay,
thank you.
Thank you for joining this little session. Yeah, it's really cool. Well done, Sander.
Yeah, he doesn't quite know that we have that we love it quite so much. I think we need to organize another kind of session, and he can teach us. Does anyone else have anything that they want to share, actually? Perspectives from other groups, I suppose, that you're part of as well, or anything like that?
I would like to say something. Jamie kind of touched on it as well. I feel like this emphasis on collaboration between, when we talk about youth advocacy or youth groups or whatever, it's also really important for me to recognize that like young people don't necessarily, it's also what Greta says, like young people don't want to be in the situation where they're having to, you know, fight this and this battle. Like, yeah, like it's important that young people do that, because obviously we've got a big stake in it. We're going to be alive for however long. But I think that this kind of like, oh yeah, young people sort it out kind of thing, like that also gets to me. So I think it's also really, really vital that it is a intergenerational conversation, intergenerational collaboration. So that, yeah, that's just something, my little 2 pence. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Does anyone else want to ask a question about anything that we've touched upon today, or make a comment or a reflection?
And in which case, maybe we'll just round off with a quick, like, what our plans are now, and then we're going to play this epic question. Yeah, we're going to play the epic sound recording of the Healthy Peatland.
Yes.
To find.
What I did want to say that there was a question earlier that I said we would come back to, which was just about whether or not it need be a full 100% transition. So I'm just kind of bringing you out of this painting and this the lure of music for a second to talk again about the transition. Essentially, I don't think it has to be. Of course, like this is then coming not necessarily from a really in-depth perspective or something, but I think the changes need to be made everywhere, as I said, but I don't think we suddenly just do a whole 360. I think the climate and ecological crisis requires so many different responses, and polludiculture is one of those responses, I believe, but it comes hand in hand with so many others and other policies and other initiatives that hopefully will be implemented in the CAP as well, outside of peatlands and polludiculture, with an eye on tackling the environmental crises as well. And that can be done through other forms of agriculture and other initiatives as well. So I just wanted to answer that question. But yeah, of course, like I say, I mean, there are probably so many answers to this. That's just my little, also 2 cents. If anyone's got a wallet, we're giving out money apparently.
Okay, in which case, I'm just going to give a quick, like, what our plans are now. So we still need to get this document out and published, or also online published. And we need to get it on the desks of all the MEPs and get it all in every single one inbox. And so this is our next thing on the radar. And we have been thinking throughout this process whether we can actually physically go and visit some people. But this is obviously still very much a question mark, with especially the Netherlands corona cases. So you'll hear whether we're either cycling across Europe or we're getting on the bus. Potentially that might happen, potentially not. And in the next.
Sorry, we're also just getting distracted by the chats as we go, but you do.
Yeah, so in the next week, you will get an online version of the Peat anthology to read. And the last thing to mention, I think that's it, right? And then we're going to round off with the...
Yeah, I mean, those are the last of our intentions when it comes to the anthology. Of course, we have some other ideas brewing, but we might also be taking a little bit of time to regroup a little bit and take part in a few other events that aren't our own initiative, but we do have some other things coming. So then you just follow our social media. And I hate that I was the one who had to be there. Follow us on social media. We're active,
like and
sometimes.
Subscribe.
And I guess like people can also like get in touch if they're interested in coming to a meeting or have another contact or an idea.
Yes.
Yeah,
we're always, our email is always open.
Okay, so now you will find the healthy peatland, lo and behold.
And you can all just kind of, maybe if anybody had any last words to say, otherwise you can kind of just exit out whilst listening to the healthy peatland. I think
it goes for 13 minutes, so
stay for as long as you want.
As long or short.
Yeah. Nice to have you all here. Thank you for coming. Sorry about the technical difficulties, and hopefully we see you again soon.
And this was slightly more gezellig, as they say in the Netherlands, which means like cozy vibes.
This was more gezellig.